welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all doing very, very well. If you're in the UK, happy bank holiday weekend. Today's video, I'm filming it on the Thursday, I'm editing it on the Thursday, it's going up on the Thursday. It's my mid-year freak-out tag. So today's video is a series of questions. I filmed this last year. I don't know if I did it the year before. I will link last year's video down below. And it's just a sort of like check-in on your reading halfway through the year. I will be doing a best books of the year so far video towards, I say towards the end of this month, but probably not really, like in the next sort of few videos. But I really think this is a good tag where you can sort of, like I said, check in with your reading so far. There's 13 questions. Shall we get going? Minnie sat there being really cute but looking a bit sad. Minnie, are you sad? No, you're happy. It's just the angle of her head looks sad. Let's get started. So, the first question is, best book you've read so far in 2022, and this is gonna spoil my best books of the year so far, because my best book that I've read the year so far is Slug by Holly McNish, which, can you believe it, is a series of poetry. It's, I loved this. I love this so much. I read it earlier on this year and I just don't think it's gonna be topped. I'd be delighted if it was topped, but I don't know if it's going to be topped. It's just been so good. So there's a whole series of poems in here, from periods to fingering to growing up to the relationship that Holly had with her nan. And not only is it poems, it's also sort of the context of those poems, which is something that I've always really wanted when reading poetry, to be like, oh, but what does this mean, and what sort of, like, and it's all there in black and white for you. I absolutely loved it. And then the even better than that was that I read this and loved it, and then a couple of weeks later me and my cousin Laura went to see Holly do a poetry reading at Vanishing Literary Festival, and it was absolutely amazing. And I've been constantly checking her website ever since to see if she's down my neck of the woods again. Neck of the woods again. And I also got a little bookmark from Vanishing Literary Festival. I didn't buy this one here. People might be confused that mine looks like this if you've got other ones. I think this is the Waterstones edition. It's got additional material in the back as well about the pandemic. But yeah, made me laugh, made me cry, made me happy, made me sad. Just everything in here I absolutely loved. And to feel that much of a connection with a poetry collection is just unbelievable. And for me, I mean, and I'm definitely going to go back and revisit it. I've already had a little reread through some of the poems about periods when I've been on my period. And yeah, I'm definitely going to go back. But by far the best book that I've read so far this year. Absolutely adored it. Love you, Holly. Next up is the best sequel you've read so far in 2022. I think I've only read one book that is a sequel so far, but I really enjoyed it, and that's Again Rachel by Marian Keyes. This is the sequel to Rachel's Holiday, which came out 25 years ago. It really holds up very well, Rachel's Holiday. I read it, if it wasn't last year, it might have been the year before. I feel like I read it during pandemic hardcore days, so I feel like it might have been, well, I read Grown Ups, didn't I? And then I think I went on and read Rachel's Holiday. Anyway, this is the sequel of it, as I said, set 25 years. Well, I think it is set 25 years after. Minnie's on the thing, so the camera might be moving. And yeah, just as I enjoyed Rachel as a character and her sort of trials and tribulations in Rachel's Holiday, she is a drug and alcohol addict, and Rachel's Holiday, she goes to rehab to look at those addictions she has and overcome them. And then in Again Rachel, she's working in that rehabilitation facility, and then there's a romantic storyline going on there as well as sort of like getting up to date with her family and stuff like that. Marian Keyes reads the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook, and I think I read Rachel's Holiday last time. That is correct, because I remember giving the book to my auntie. And Marian Keyes reads it and does an amazing job. And I actually listened to an interview of her, I think with Graham Norton. Well, it might have been at the end. Yeah, it is. It's at the end of the Audible audio. There's a bonus interview of her and Graham Norton, and she talks about going back to re-record Rachel's Holiday in her voice, which I would definitely be listening to. Just because, like, some of the Marian Keyes things I've read I really haven't loved, but this Rachel's Holiday and Again Rachel and also Grown Ups are ones that I've really loved. So yeah, I would very much recommend it as a sequel. My mum's actually listening to it at the moment and hasn't read Rachel's Holiday, and when I said to her, oh, I don't know if that would work, and she went online and she said no, that everyone said it's fine, like I'll be fine listening to it. So yeah, so she's going to it the other way around. But very good book, lots to do with addiction and pregnancy loss and things like that. Like, Marian Keyes has just got such a way of being able to look at big issues and make them so personable and so, like, you really feel them, even if you haven't had any dealings with those sort of big issues before. And I just feel like she does it with such respect and care. Like, I really enjoyed it. That's what I'm saying. Next up was the new release you haven't read yet, but you really want to. I've got it out from the library at the moment. I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to read it before it's got to go back though, because at the moment I'm reading all Jane Austen books because of June Austen. But I'd really love to read the new Candice Carty-Williams, which is People Person. You may well know that Queenie was one of my favourite books of the year a couple of years ago, by Candice Carty-Williams, and this is her new book about Dimple Pennington and her sort of extended family. She knew of her half siblings, but she didn't really know them. 5 people who don't have anything in common except the faint memories of being driven through Brixton in their dad's gold Jeep and some pretty complex abandonment issues. Dimple has bigger things to think about. She's 30 and her life isn't really going anywhere, an aspiring lifestyle influencer with a terrible and wayward boyfriend. Dimple's life has shrunk to the size of a phone screen, and despite a small but loyal following, she's never felt more alone. That is until a catastrophic event brings her and her half siblings, Nikisha, Danny, Lizzie and Prince, crashing back into her life. And when they're all forced to reconnect with Cyril Pennington, their absent father, they never really knew things get even more complicated. There's also, I've just seen here, there is a People Person Spotify list on a playlist on Spotify, so I'm excited about that. So yeah, I might have to break my Jane Austen vibe and just read this for the month, because I would really love to get to it, just based on how much I loved Queenie and how much that sounds great. And when I've mentioned this, a few people have commented below saying it's a really good book, you'll really enjoy it. New, it's most anticipated release for the second half of 2022, and although these aren't new books, this is a new like collection of them, I guess, coming out. So I really love the Penguin cloth bound classics. I've got one here, which is a question for later on in the tag. And this is Persuasion by Jane Austen. These Penguin cloth bound classics are designed by Coralie Bickford Smith, who's an amazing designer, and I love her designs, and I've read her children's books and think she does an amazing job. And she's got a new series of books, so they're always like this, with like a different print with different things on. So this one's got feathers and stuff like that. What's that noise, David? It's Beyonce! Alexa, stop. Beyonce just started playing. Sorry about that. Oh God. I can't even think what I was saying that might have sounded like. And it was in another room. Confusing. Yeah, so Coralie Bickford Smith is bringing out a collection of little cloth bound classics, and this is going to be the autumn collection. I will insert pictures of the ones that I've pre-ordered. I've ordered The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Speaking of Jane Austen, I've ordered Lady Susan by Jane Austen. I've also ordered Lolly Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner, and I've ordered Hellscreen by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. So yeah, so these are all coming out, and then there's going to be like, so these like shorter books by prolific authors, and then there's going to be a winter collection and things like that. These are coming out in, even though it's the autumn collection, they're coming out in August. So yeah, so I'm very much excited to get my mitts on those, and I will read them. I've got a lot of Penguin cloth bound classics that are at the top there that I haven't got around to reading yet, but I will read them. Next up is the biggest disappointment. My biggest disappointment, and I still own this book even though I listened to the audiobook of it this year, is this one, Sky Day by Leonie Ross. I bought this from Harbour Books last year and thought, oh my God, this sounds amazing. It's set on an archipelago, set on an island. It's all about sort of superpowers, and there's a lot in there about food, because one of the main characters we're following is their superpower is to flavour food through their hands. It's about a festival, a wedding or a festival. I think it's a wedding that's happening, and everyone on the island getting ready for it. And I started reading it last year, and then Christmas came around, and this was actually on my 5-star predictions list for last year, and then Christmas came around. I was like, I need to start reading my Christmas books, so I'm going to put this aside. And then in the new year I thought, I am going to go back to it, but I'm going to go back to it from the very beginning, because I'd got about maybe 70 pages in. I'm going to go back to it from the beginning, and I'm going to listen to it as an audiobook. And I just couldn't get on with it. There's also something that happens halfway through the book. There's a spoiler coming up now, but you may well have heard of this spoiler. Everyone's vaginas fall out, which just felt really sort of unusual. And And yeah, I didn't love it at all, and I was really, really disappointed. Like I said, it was on my, any book that you think is going to be a 5-star book and then ends up being like, what, is just a disappointment. So that is my biggest disappointment. So that is actually going in my bag here to redistribute to somebody else. So there we go, that's done there. Next one is the biggest surprise. So my biggest surprise, and I was delighted when I received this book, but I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. Maybe because of the topic matter, but also, yeah, well, anyway, I'll tell you. It's The Opposite of Butterfly Hunting, The Tragedy and the Glory of Growing Up, a memoir by Evanna Lynch. Evanna Lynch is an actress, an activist. You may well know her for playing the part of Luna Lovegood in the Harry Potter films. And this was her biography, her memoir, about her time growing up as a massive Harry Potter fan. But also, like, it draws very, very heavily on her experiences with an eating disorder. So there's heavy trigger warnings here for eating disorders. And I'd never read a book with somebody in it who spoke so honestly about their eating disorder and how much it had sort of taken over their lives, and how, this sounds like an awful thing to say, but like Ivana would agree, how proud of her eating disorder she was, and how much she'd become this eating disorder, and she always thought she could maybe lose a little bit more weight even when she was literally at death's door. So there's all that going on. So like I was surprised that I was enjoying it as much as I was because of the subject matter, which is intense and also heartbreaking, because she's got this big network of family and friends and people who are trying to cure her and help her, and all she can see is the calories and the fat content and wanting to lose more weight. But there's also a lot in here about creativity. Even through her eating disorder, when she lost all sort of interest in anything else, she still wanted to be creative. And even when she was in sort of rehab for her eating disorder, she'd be plaiting people's hair and doing people's nails and making birthday cards and things like that. So all of those things were lovely to hear as well. And then on top of it, which I found quite funny, was that how much of a massive Harry Potter fan Ivana was. She'd read all of the books, and one thing they actually say to her is that if she doesn't meet her weight target, they won't allow her to get the new Harry Potter book, and like they know that this is one of the only things that she cares about. So like that just sort of like shows the gravity of how much she loved Harry Potter. When she got the opportunity to go for the part of Luna Lovegood, who she loves, when she joined the cast, it's so funny to hear her sort of like interacting with the actors who are playing these other characters when she literally knows everything about them. And she like meets Daniel Radcliffe. She has like a maybe like a chemistry test or something, like a reading thing with him to see if they interact well together. And when he meets her, he's very professional and lovely, as I always think he seems actually in interviews. She's like, oh hi, how are you? And in her back, like internal monologues like, your mum's called Sue and your dad's called this and you were born here, and she just knows like everything about him and everyone there. But yeah, so I really like those bits as well. But yeah, I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. As I said, it being really heavy on the eating disorders, I never thought that I'd be able to sort of say, oh yeah, I enjoyed this book that is mainly about somebody's eating disorder. But yeah, Ivana's, I really loved the writing, and I really loved finding out more about her. I think I might revisit this as an audiobook, you know, because it's going to be narrated by her, I hope, I imagine so. But yeah, loved it. Loved it, and really liked hearing about her experience on Dancing with the Stars as well, which is the UK's equivalent of, the US's equivalent of Strictly Come Dancing, which we have here in the UK. She got to the final with her dance partner Keo, and that was really enjoyable to hear as well. So yeah, and I watched some of her dances, and she's a great dancer. I enjoyed it, hence the smile on my face. Next up is my favourite new author. I can't give it to anybody else other than Holly McNish, because I loved this so much that I'm going to revisit all of her other poetry, even though her other poetry isn't quite as hasn't got so much contextual sort of like accompanying writing with it. I just really loved her, and I'm going to listen to her audiobooks and things like that. Also, one thing I should have said, when I ordered this book and it arrived, like imagine my sort of like, this is a poetry book, look how big it is. So to have all that context in there was amazing. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I've never bonded with anything like this in many years, so adored it. So I can't not say Holly McNish. Next up is my newish fictional crush. So this is from a book, this sort of fictional crush. I guess it's not a romantic crush, it's more of a like, they all just seem like they're having such a lovely fun, and that's the series of Heartstopper, which has just been out on Netflix, came out in May, and they've just announced that they're going to be doing a second and third series. I'd read the Heartstopper graphic novels, really loved them, which is a series of graphic novels about two young lads at school, Nick and Charlie, them meeting and falling in love, and then the sort of like trials and tribulations around being in love when you're at school, and also dealing with Nick is bisexual and sort of like realising that for himself when he'd always thought he was straight. Charlie had some mental health problems, and him and Nick negotiating them and things like that. So the whole series is amazing, but they made a series of the first book on Netflix, and it was just so joyous and so fun, and the actors who are playing the parts are just amazing. The guy who plays Nick, Kit Connor, who's also plays the young Elton John in what's the Elton John film called? Rocket Man? Yeah. He is amazing. Like, Nick Nelson is one of the most likeable characters I've ever read in my whole life. So for him to be able to make him more likeable is like a complete achievement. I love the sort of like, you get to know a little bit more about some of the background characters, which is great. So I've loved that and had sort of like a crush on them as a whole. Like, they're all just adorable. And then the other night I woke up and I said to David, I had a dream about everyone in Heartstopper last night, but I was still the age that I am now, and they're all still, I mean, I guess they're like 15 and 16. And I had a dream that I was still the age I am now, and I was like, where do you want to be driven to, guys? I was just trying to like be helpful and friends to them. But yeah, it's a really good series and a great adaptation, and I can't wait for the second and third series. Absolutely can't wait for it. I already feel like I want to watch it again because it was just so joyful. But yeah, an absolute crush on them as a friendship group, and would love to be involved with them as a friendship group. Loved them. And then my newest favourite character, this is a strange one, because my newest favourite character comes from a book. It's a real person, and that's Katherine of Aragon. I've been reading the 6 Tudor Queens series. I've read the Katherine of Aragon book and the Anne Boleyn book, and when reading, and I've vlogged both of them actually, so I'll link them down below, and I'm planning on reading all of them. I'm not reading Jane Seymour until July, so that won't be up this month. But yeah, I really enjoyed getting to know Katherine. So much so that when I finished the book, I actually felt a bit like I missed her at the end. I was like, oh, I really miss Katherine, and like being with her every day and finding out more about her. I think I was also, this was enhanced by watching The Spanish Princess on Amazon Prime as well, which I very much enjoyed, and getting to know her there. But yeah, I really loved being in that world with her. And even though the book itself was very sort of like, because it spans her whole life and a lot happens, and you're very much like, I arrived in England and then I went here and then this person died and then this person died and then his mother died and blah 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 blah. So like the first sort of like 2/3 of it are almost like a sort of potted history lesson. It's only really when you get into the last third that you start getting to know Katherine, and like all of her sort of personality traits aren't normally things that I sort of not like in a person, but like she's very religious, for instance, which I'm not, and also her living in a completely different type. But like I really enjoyed getting to know her and loved reading her as a character. And also got to revisit her slightly when I was reading the Anne Boleyn book, obviously from the Anne Boleyn point of view, which wasn't favourable towards Katherine. But yeah, I would definitely say that Katherine so far, I'm looking forward to reading the other 4 books in the series and seeing if I bond as much with any of the other queens as I did Katherine of Aragon. But yeah, I would say Katherine of Aragon has been my favourite character this year. So, book that made me cry. Guys, this book, I didn't stop crying from start to finish. This is Many Different Kinds of Love, a story of life, death and the NHS by Michael Rosen. There's a strong possibility I won't even get through this without crying. So this is a book written by Michael Rosen, who is a children's author. We're Going on a Bear Hunt is one of his most famous books, and he falls ill with COVID in the first sweep of the pandemic, and it's only sort of like by chance that his life is saved. He lives next door to a GP who's recently got an oximeter, I think that's what they're called, that they measure the oxygen in your blood or something anyway, and his GP tried it out on him and found out he was very sick and sent him into hospital, and then he had to be put in a coma. And the first sort of part of this book is his a journal that was left next to his bed that the nurses and the volunteers that are helping on the COVID ward, he was in ITU obviously, write in. And there's so much sort of like love and care, and just like, these people didn't have to write in this, and they've just written so many things like, hi Michael, I'm your helper this evening. Your vitals are slowly improving, including your temperature. We've wrapped you in a heated blanket and reposition you regularly to improve your lung perfusion. You're sleeping peacefully at the moment, monitored and controlled by the ventilator. We've still got another 8 hours together, but so far so good. Jenny, physio by day, ITU helper by night. And there's just making me want to cry now. There's just so much in there about these people who have worked for the NHS and have repurposed their jobs to been able to care for these really, really sick people, and then that being reflected in the lovely messages that they're leaving in Michael's book, and I assume other patients on the ward. So that bit really touched me anyway, working for the NHS and like working with a team of doctors who were working on a COVID ward in the first wave, particularly the sort of registrar doctors who I was working with, who still have so much learning to do, and had sort of put that on hold to work really long hours and look after these really sick people. So yeah, it reminded me of that, and it made me feel like proud and emotional. And then the rest of the book is Michael's recovery and him coming out of the coma, and him learning to walk again, and him learning to breathe on his own again, and then gradually going home, and then having home care visits, and still being in this pandemic, and still being like thinking, what the fuck is this government doing, and like, and yeah, just stuff like that. So, and all written through poetry and stuff like that. It, like, as you can see, it affected me a lot. And when I went to read it, I was a bit nervous about reading it, because I thought, oh, it still feels a bit fresh, and it is really fresh, but it's also really, really important to read. And yeah, I loved it, and it made me really cry. So yeah, there was no other book that was going up for that question. That was the one. A book that made you happy. Hurrah! It's Welcome to Your Life by Bethany Rutter. This is a women's contemporary fiction romance book, which isn't a genre that I read much of. I absolutely adored this. Firstly, because the protagonist, Serena, is a fat girl, which you don't often read in these women contemporary fiction books, and the only mentions of weight in here were of like her feeling pleased with the way she looks, and like, something that still makes me cross, but like I was glad to see represented here, was like Serena is she makes her own clothes, because the clothes she wants to wear, which are to do with the current fashions and trends and things, you can't buy her size clothes in your average high street shop or on your average like online fashion website. So yeah, all of the stuff. So there's no sort of like, oh, I had a latte at lunch, so I thought I'd better go for a walk around the block to try and work it off, which, by the way, I have read in women's contemporary fiction books before. But I really loved Serena. I really loved the sort of representation of female friendship in here, as well as the premise of Serena. The whole premise of this book is that Serena breaks up with her husband on their wedding day. She doesn't turn up for the wedding because she sort of comes to a realisation that she's always gone for what she thinks she deserves as a fat person, rather than what she actually wants. So there's nothing wrong with the guy that she's going to marry, but she hasn't felt sort of like passionate feelings about him for many years, and she's always she felt quite lucky that he was still interested in her, even if she'd put on loads of weight, etc. And then the premise of it is that when she's broken up with him, she moves to London, and the representation in here of London as a sort of character, without sounding too sort of like GCSE English question, is like great. Like London is there's a real sort of like love for London in here as well, which was lovely to read about. And yeah, she goes on a different date every week with different men, and the way she sort of like puts them into case notes was really, really funny. There's a particular one which had me howling, about a man who just spoke so sort of like a medieval peasant, and he thought he was being really, really funny with it, and like, can one get you another glass of mead, my liege? Things like that. It was just so much. But yeah, so those dates put into sort of like case studies were really, really funny. And then the ending I really, really enjoyed as well. So yeah, very much enjoyed this a lot. It made me feel really happy, representation wise, female friendship wise. The dates I found really funny. London's representation I thought was great. Yeah, really much enjoyed it. And I've already said it when I wrap this up, but like, if you're looking for a book to read on holiday this year, go for this. It's great, absolutely great. Really, really loved it. Next up is the most beautiful book you've bought or received, both of which I've received from the publisher, neither of which I've read, but like these front covers, one of which is a proof as well, so I don't even know, I can only imagine how beautiful the finished one's going to be. So the one that's a proof is Wildcare, by Jen Cowney and Fiona Lensvelt, and this is Let the Tarot Tell Your Story. I mean, look at that. Like I said, that is a proof copy, so I don't even know what it's going to look like in the end, but it's set up like a tarot card. I'm quite into sort of like tarot card imagery. If I just quickly show you here, I've got a tarot card. You can't really see it very well, can you? This one up here. Boop. That's the lovers as a tarot card. So yeah, I'm quite into sort of like that imagery. Here I am back again. But yeah, I just love this. I love the yellow and the blue together. I love sort of how the lines have been, like these lines in this water reflected in the lines in the mountains, and then all of this. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Can't wait to read it. Can't wait to read can't wait to see the finished product. And then also, you just can't get me away from some gold foil. This is Matrix by Lauren Groff, and I love these sort of like golden, both shiny and matte gold leaves around these nuns reading and going about their nunny business, set on this sort of pale pink with this almost purpley blue. I just think it's a great collection of colours. And also, I've just seen here an audacious piece of storytelling full of passion, wisdom and magic by Sarah Waters. I didn't know that. Oh, and the end papers of this are also gorgeous. So yeah, both of those beautiful. And then the last question is, what do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, I don't feel like I need to read anything. Like, I love reading, it's my favourite thing. Oh, have I knocked myself off centre since I've moved back? All of these books behind me are basically all unread books, so it'll be nice to get through some of these. But in particular, I made a video, and I'll link it down below because I'm not going to go into detail about these books here. But I made a video about the books that I think will be 5-star books for the rest of the year. I'm already behind on them. I was supposed to read Notes on an Execution by Daniel Kafka in May, and I didn't, so I need to read that. But I'll mention the other ones as well that I think are going to be 5 stars. So yeah, these ones I would like to read by the end of the year. Persuasion by Jane Austen, that's being read this month because we're reading it for June Austen, and also it's from a Patreon book club. How Beautiful We Were by Mbolo and Bew. Complicit by Winnie M. Lee. The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. I think I might listen to this on audiobook. I've seen that it's on Libby, so I might start listening to this next month. I've still got like 3 weeks wait on it, so maybe then. The Vanishing Act of Esme Lennox by Maggie O'Farrell. And lastly, Affinity by Sarah Waters, who I previously mentioned. So yeah, if you want to know any more about those books, I will link that video down below. So there we go. Those are my answers to the mid-year free cap tag. Very much enjoyed doing that. I do love a check-in on the old reading. As I said, I'll be doing a video where I'll be talking about my best books of the year so far. I'll include some sort of like bookish stats and stuff in there as well to let you know how I'm getting on with my reading. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye! Bye bye. See ya. Bye.